It's all so easy. Try a little tenderness. Try a little
Mighty fine. That was the great Tennessee Ernie Ford, accompanied by his conductor and band leader, my friend and yours, Opryland USA musical director, Lloyd Wells. And that song, Try a Little Tenderness, written by Jimmy Campbell, Reg Connolly, and Harry M. Woods. And special thanks to Jerry Gowan for preserving and mastering the audio and video from Hee Haw Archives. This must have been recorded around 1991. And continuing my conversation with Lloyd from 2019, I asked him about Ernie Ford and his relationship with him.
I wonder sometimes as to how that thing about life, your life traveling in a route of some kind, and to touch. There was no way on earth that I would have thought when I was a kid that I'd ever touch base with Ernie Ford or with George Lindsay. You know, it just the farthest thing in my mind, man. And how your life, God knows I've lived, you know, way off from Nashville for a long time. And then it just moves around. You can't ever tell where it's going to go, man.
For sure.
I told Buck, he's got, one of his sons is still living, Buck, Jeffrey Ford. He had two, Brian, who died several years ago from cancer. But I told Buck that the first time I was conscious of Ernie Ford, where we lived in Mississippi, in Laurel, in a straight line about 500 feet in the back of my house through some woods was the South Mississippi Fairground. Good-sized fairground, being the southern half of the state, you know, took care of a huge thing. And one year, and we can find out what year this is by the records, and I can't remember what they are, but he had recorded I'll Never Be Free. Do you remember that song at all?
I don't.
And it was a hit song, and they played that thing over the loudspeaker system in the fairgrounds over and over and over and over. And at night, especially when the air cooled and all, you could hear that so well. Sitting in our living room, you could just like, you know. So I that's the first real touch with Ernie I ever had. It was such a powerful tune. If you Google it and listen to it, sometime it's he and the girl Ernie Ford, and I can't remember what her name was.
Me either.
But they sing it in harmony, and it's a strong rhythmic ballad, you know. And I love that. I learned about Jimmy Bryant, Speedy West, and those guys that played with him from those records that I heard of him.
Wow, I had no idea they worked with Ernie.
They had a lot more going, but one of their big accounts was with Ernie. Man, they did all those the records that were done not with Jack Fashionata and an orchestra as such, but the ones that were done with the rhythm section, especially the country rhythm section, whatever. And he'd always had those two guys on there.
Wow, that's wonderful. Was 16 Tons his biggest record?
Sure. I played the last time he sang it was in Bristol, Tennessee, and I conducted the orchestra for it. He was on the show, and he only did. We were dedicating a redone theater there in town. I can't remember the name of the theater in Bristol, but it was a big day, big celebration, all that kind of thing, and a lot of folks on the show. And he finally decided we brought the whole book, a whole orchestra book, and they had an orchestra for us, and he had finally just decided to do that John Denver tune. It's good to be back home again. They talked to the folks for a while. Then he closed with 16 Tons. That's the last time he ever performed.
And the last lick you played behind him was dee da 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 da.
I didn't play that.
You didn't play
I conducted the orchestra for that.
So you didn't have a guitar in your hand?
Yeah, I did, but I was
I
conducting.
so.
Yeah. I did for Ernie. Yeah.
Did you? You did for all the Opryland stuff too?
Yeah. But it doesn't say much for how well I conduct, just one hand usually, but I get through it on fair dates and big shows and all like that. If I have the guitar around my neck, regardless of the fact that I've got an orchestra, usually sometimes with full string section, at big shows and backup vocals and all that kind of thing. If there's time that things lapse and you need something to fill, I've got the thing in my hand. If he wants to sing something, if he wants to pull an old tune out of the bag and sing it, I got it there. I don't have to go look for it or anything.
Yeah, gotcha. So, when and how did you actually meet Tennessee Ernie Ford?
1974. It was my second year to work at Opryland. I had worked the Dixieland show before that, 1973, and I worked a show called Showboat in 74. And in the middle of the year, George Mabry came to me and said, would you like to go to Russia? I said, no. I mean, we were sitting in the cafeteria eating, and I said, no, why? So we sat and talked. He says, well, we're going to go to Russia. And he said, I'd like for you to go be band leader. So I wound up going, and of course, it was an Opryland troupe of about 14 on stage cast and a 7-piece band, country band. And we toured Russia for a little over a month, 5 different cities. And I got next to him during that. You get next to people in Russia when you're traveling with them, because nobody else knows
other
what's going on.
Americans.
That's right. And it just went on. I came back, and when Ernie would come to Nashville or the environs here, I would play guitar with Jack Fashionata and the big band. And then Jack got Alzheimer's, and Ernie called me one day and said, I'd like for you to conduct and arrange for me. And I got the gig and did that for about 18 years.
Awesome. Did you find that that gig got in the way of your Opryland responsibilities?
Fortunately, Opryland allowed me to do it. I never, again, I hate to use the term again, but in a straight line, I never asked about if we had 2 or 3 dates that lasted for 3 or 4 days, whatever. I just take off and did it, mainly because I took care of my end of my promised Opryland.
Yeah.
Got all the work done. There was never anything there, so nobody ever questioned me. I think nobody ever really realized what I did.
Oh my goodness.
So they didn't question it as long as it was all done.
Did you ever do any tour shows with Ernie or perform with other folks?
We shared concerts once with Rosemary Clooney. Minnie would go with us a lot of times. She liked to travel with Ernie because it was a big orchestra and backup singers, and she considered that class, and she wanted to be part of a class act. So that was fun to watch those two people. You have a set form for the program, X amount of songs by Ernie and X amount by the backup singers and intermission and all that kind of thing. But when Minnie would come, there would always be a section where she would do a few minutes of her stuff, and then Ernie would walk out on the stage with her, and they would stand there for a few minutes and do spontaneous things. And it was almost like what I imagined watching 2 seasoned vaudeville performers would have been, because they played off each other, and you never knew what was coming. No. And I'd sit there and just crack up at them, man. I'd just cry laughing.
That's so cool. I would love to see something like that if it was on YouTube or whatever.
I'm not too sure there's that kind of freedom thing. You might get some off some TV shows where it was pretty well structured. They're loose within their thing, but they had a script to go by. But there was no script to this. To just walk out there and start,
Well, I know for a fact when I was a little kid, I remember things would stop in our house when my grandmother wanted to watch Gunsmoke or the Tennessee Ernie Ford television show. I mean, did you find that he was bigger than life to you when you worked with him?
There's no question about that. He was. It may be that in his television schedule, overall schedule, his show and him being on other people's shows and all that we got to see a side of Ernie, an intimate side of him, a funny side, a serious side, that you don't get to see with the major stars now, because they're either doing concerts where it's all just balls to the wall, as fast as you can get the songs done and as loud as they can get them done, and then they're gone. And there's no sit around and tell stories or any of that kind of crap, that happened with Ernie. You watched him so many times. God knows when he was on that Lucille Ball show, just those few things, like you said, the whole world stopped and watched because they wanted to see him. And he didn't sing. He was just Ernie, just doing Ernie things then. And he was definitely bigger than life. I appreciate him because he appreciated the musicians that supported him. He knew that they were a big part of his life and his success.
The musicians were.
Yeah. And songwriters and musicians. And he loved songwriters, Loved to talk about them, knew all about them. And he was also quick to serve you a compliment if something happened right,
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, what a thing. We did, give you a quick one, right along toward the end of his life, we did a concert in Syracuse, I believe, or somewhere, just right around the northern border of New York, a big theater and around thing. And he of course lived in San Francisco, in Palo Alto. He lived out there, all his family did, for years and years and years, man. Buck and Brian all were raised out there.
I had no idea.
Yeah. Fact is, his remains are there, I believe. And in any case, he would call me and say, we got a gig 2 weeks from now and whatever.
Yeah.
And if you want to do something, we had a book. I mean, he had tons of arrangements. You know about all that stuff that I guided toward the University of Southern Mississippi down there. Do you know about all that stuff? No, I don't. Remind me at the end of this, and I'll digress. Anyway, but he had a library. He had all that music that had been written for him, arranged for him throughout his television show and all his recordings and all that. He had all that in vaults out in California. Jim Lokes was his manager, and he had all those things cross-referenced. He could pick one out, By the same token, he had one book. He had a big briefcase that I carried that had the books, the orchestral books, the entire thing, all the strings, all the horns, all that. And there was about 12 tunes in there that he normally did on a show, on a personal appearance. If you want to do something different, he'd call me. We'd get it out of the vault, so forth. So anyway, he called and he says, we're going to do Syracuse, whatever, theater and around, and it's not too far from Christmas. So he said, here's about 5 songs, and he named off about five hymns. He says, put me together a medley, and I'll do whatever you do. So I sat down and put together a medley. And he had a vocal group that traveled with him. It was a dance group. They called I can't remember what the name was. It was about 3 girls and 3 guys. And they all sang well. They moved well. They had sections of his show that they would do to break it up, But I would do the vocal charts to back him up and mail them to them 2 weeks before the show, and they would memorize them and come. And they'd arrive at the venue with those things memorized. So we get there on that day, and we had a rehearsal, and I had previously asked Ernie, and I don't think he'd ever done this before, but I asked him, please don't come to the rehearsal until I call you. Don't come to the band rehearsal. Let me conduct the band rehearsal, get all of things fixed. Let me get next to the musicians, explain where I'm coming from, let them know where I'm coming from, let them hear this brogue and get through laughing at it and all that. And then I'll call you in, and he would come into the rehearsal, and we'd do about 8 measures of each song just to make sure it was satisfactory. So on this day, we rehearsed with the backup singers this medley I'd done, and it was God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, and 2 or 3 more things, pretty Christmas things, with the orchestra, the whole 9 yards. And I called him, and he came out on the stage, and we went through that medley. This is the first time he'd ever heard it. And all he had to do was just sing on top of it, because I had arranged the vocal backup under him so that he was the top voice. He never had to worry about anybody on top of him, a soprano singing an octave above him or some damn thing like that.
Yeah, right.
And it was nice. And when we got through, he says, "I'll be back in a minute." And he walked off the stage, and he came back on stage with his then wife, who he had just married a couple of years before, Beverly. And as he walked on the stage, he says, "Beverly, I want you to hear what Lloyd has done."
Oh.
That's verbatim what he said. I almost melted, man. That's high praise, you know.
Oh my God! Yeah.
And she sat down on the thing, and we went through it again. And he was free with that kind of thing, you know. I thought the world of the man.
Yeah.
I still tear up when I think about it, man.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of our conversation with Lloyd Wells, musical director for Opryland USA in Nashville, Tennessee, and conductor and arranger for Tennessee Ernie Ford. He shared some great stories about Mr. Ford during this episode. And right now we're listening to a little bit of Lloyd's music from his solo guitar CD, Invitation. This is a Jimmy Van Heusen medley. We'll listen to a little bit of this. We'll probably fade out of it, and then you can look for a link in with this posting or wherever you might find this on the internet, and it'll take you to where you can listen to the full recordings of his CD, Invitation. Thanks very much, and thank you for joining me, Brian Hilligoss.